You and a friend are catching up over a cup of coffee, and they tell you that they've recently reached the top 50th percentile on chess.com. You don't know much about chess, or your friend for that matter, but you have heard that the top chess players in the world achieve somewhere around 3000 ELO on the website. And a brand new player who barely knows the rules might achieve 0 or 100 ELO, and you make the very fair assumption that they're around 1500. Almost immediately, you realize your mistake because your friend is no longer smiling and frankly seems a bit upset with you. They then inform you that the top 50th percentile is not 1500 at all, it is actually 600. You apologize to your friend, and after explaining that you did not mean to offend him, you start to ask yourself, shouldn't the average ELO be somewhere around the middle of the best players and the worst players on the website? Why is the average player rated so low? While doing my research for this video, I came across a lot of people on Reddit who seem to come to the same conclusion, that it must be because of inactive accounts and bots that are lowering the average ELO. And it kind of makes sense, right? If a bunch of players just make an account and play a single game, get rated like 200, and then never play again, these players are definitely gonna lower the average. However, it did not take very long to realize that that cannot be it, since the percentile calculation on chess.com only takes into account active players. And just in case it was lying to me, I messaged chess.com support and they gave me a very similar answer. Therefore, we must keep looking. The second most popular response was that shows like the Queen's Gambit and the event on Twitch called PogChamps added a massive amount of new players to chess.com, so much so that their servers couldn't even handle it. This is already a much better answer, and it makes a lot of sense because after all, it's very true. If you introduce a very large amount of new players to an existing player base, the skill level is definitely going to decrease, and it can easily explain why the average is 600 ELO. However, this answer did not satisfy me either. First of all, the Queen's Gambit and PogChamps were 5 years ago. These players that were deflating the average have since quit the game, and those who remain have improved. Furthermore, the average ELO before the boom in chess's popularity was only around 900. It is indeed much closer to the 1500 range that we were expecting, but still a bit too low. And if you recall, during that time, if you were playing, chess.com started all accounts at 1200 ELO instead of letting players choose what ELO they belonged in. This means that a brand new player, which we assume to be either 0 or 100, was actually at 1200 ELO and somehow decreased their own ELO by 300. Let me remind you once again that this was before the boom in chess's popularity. So, what exactly makes chess the low ELO skewed game that it is? I started asking myself whether that had anything to do with the nature of competitive games in general. Perhaps all the esports out there had similar distribution curves. So, I went ahead and looked at StarCraft 2's ranked distribution, only to be very disappointed. It is very even, unlike chess. Maybe League of Legends would be different. It is a bit closer to chess, but still nowhere near the magnitude. However, you might know that Blizzard and Riot have a lot more control over their ranking systems, since they can introduce ways to artificially inflate or even deflate ranks through Demotion Shield, Smurf Q, etc. Since chess.com doesn't have a ranking system and inherently only depends on ELO, maybe that's where the problem lies. Let us talk a bit about the ELO system, because I think there are a few misconceptions I would like to clear up. On the surface, it is very simple. When you queue up for a game of chess, chess.com looks for an opponent of the same ELO as you and matches you against them for a fair game. However, because it's going to take an eternity to find someone of the exact same ELO as you, they settle for someone that is around your ELO. A pretty simple system on the surface. But let's say you are facing someone who is much higher rated than you. As a compensation, you might receive 1 or 2 extra points as a reward for beating a more skillful player. But who gets to decide how much compensation you are given? Is it chess.com? Could this be how they control the average to be so much lower than what we expect it to be? Unfortunately, it is not that simple. The ELO system is quite complex, and frankly, there are much better and more detailed videos explaining how it works. But simply put, your win rate against that player and the amount of compensation ELO you will receive for winning are all dictated by a few equations. In this video, we will only be looking at the following equation, which estimates your odds of winning against any other player on chess.com. You might notice that only the difference between the two players is taken into account. In theory, a 200 ELO player's odds of beating a 1500 player are the same as that 1500 player's odds of beating Magnus Carlsen. And since it's only the difference that matters here, it means that it doesn't matter how much ELO you are at, the calculations remain the same. In other words, no. The ELO system is not responsible for making it more difficult to climb as you get higher in ELO. This is a common misconception because the system makes you gain a lot of ELO at first to get you to your skill level as fast as possible, and then slowly decreases the amount as you play more games and the system is more confident of the rating that you are given. We will now talk about the real reason why the average is so low on chess.com. And it is simply because it gets much more difficult to get an advantage over players that are experienced. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this clip of Elon Musk talking about chess.
But I find chess is like it's a simple game, frankly, in my opinion. Just, I mean, you only have 64 squares. There's no fog of war. There's no tech tree.
It is very easy to disregard all of his statements since we know that chess is so much more than that. However, I think Elon was onto something, but he just got the conclusion wrong. Chess's simplicity is not what makes it easy, but rather what makes it difficult. To demonstrate this, let us compare two fictional games, Game A and Game B. Game A might be your standard esport, with all the things Elon mentioned in the clip before, like fog of war, a massive skill tree, huge maps, etc, etc. If we graph some potential skill sets of the game, it might look something like this. There is not a human on this planet that can have mastery over every skill set, so let us look at a more realistic example. Now, let's say this player is stuck at their ELO and wants to improve. Which skill set should they prioritize? This player might make the mistake of thinking that because their aim is their greatest weapon, it must be the skill which got them to the ELO they are at.
Holy shit, Reina, you're better.
And spend the next few weeks grinding away in aim labs only to see very minimal results. Luckily, in this fictional scenario, this player had a coach who told them that a few hours of review to improve their positioning would outweigh the weeks of aim labs they were about to commit to. This process of identifying weaknesses and improving upon them is what makes sports and esports so interesting. Now let us look at Game B, which is very simple. You pair up against an opponent, and whoever has the most mouse clicks under 1 minute wins. If a player of Game B wants to improve, can they take the same process as a player of the previous game? They do not have the luxury of a more complex game where there are a lot of skill sets to improve at. The only path to the top that this player possesses is to just click faster, which he is realizing very quickly that it's becoming harder and harder. Now, I am not claiming that chess is as one-dimensional as just clicking your mouse, but the game itself lacks the complexity that other esports have. The rules can be learned in under 10 minutes, and a massive factor is that execution is not important. See, our fictional player A's skill set was not entirely randomized. A lot of new players tend to focus on their execution and mechanics, because it is generally easier to grind drills while listening to music and improve your muscle memory than it is to understand the complicated macro of the game, which requires hundreds of hours of experience to even scratch the surface of. Chess is a game that does not have that luxury. It is a game where you need to spend exponentially more and more time to get better, and it consists of conscious, mind-numbing hours of studying positions, opening tactics, endgames. It really is not a surprise that so many players remain at a lower ELO. You might have noticed that this is actually my very first video, so it would mean the world to me if you could like the video and subscribe to my channel for more content like this.